Okay, welcome to video number 30 of the Diaries of a Coronavirologist YouTube channel. Today is the 28th of July and we are up to almost 17 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 around the world and just under 663,000 confirmed deaths. So today I want to talk a little bit about age and coronaviruses and COVID-19 and how age has an impact on the course of disease. And I'm doing this with one eye on the fact that there's a lot of discussion currently about whether or not schools should be reopened. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some background stuff on age and coronaviruses and the immune system and things like that, and then talk a little bit about a modeling paper. Now, I will say modeling, mathematical modeling, epidemiological modeling is slightly outside of my realm of expertise, being that my training is as a cell biologist and virologist, but being that I know something about viruses, I can still look at the data and assess it and try and pass it out for those who have an interest in this topic. So firstly, it's becoming more and more clear since we're getting more and more SARS-2 cases that coronavirus severity is associated with underlying health conditions. The people who get the most severe disease, the most severe COVID-19 outcomes, are those that have other health problems. And this is true for both MERS and SARS-1, the two other pathogenic human coronaviruses. So one of these links always seems to be age. So along with having underlying health conditions, age is often associated with the most severe outcome from any kind of pathogenic coronavirus infection. But obviously with age, there comes more likelihood of having those underlying health conditions as well. So things like obesity, diabetes, heart conditions, other lung problems are all associated with severe disease, and those are things that you develop over time. By and large, obviously there is genetic components to diabetes, but type 2 diabetes is something that you develop over time through diet and things like this. And obesity is something that develops through time through poor diet. So as these insults build up, that's potentially playing a huge role in the outcome of a coronavirus infection. And therefore age is also associated because there is a buildup of these insults. Smoking, for example, may also be associated with severity of coronavirus disease or exposure to lung pollution, which again, over time, more and more insult to the lungs, being that they're making them less equipped to cope with a coronavirus infection. And it seems like the immune system gets impacted by age as well. So it seems that as you get older, the immune system potentially becomes more likely to be dysregulated. So you get this hyperactive inflammatory response, the cytokine storm, and that's what's being associated with the most severe outcomes from COVID-19 and the other coronavirus infections. The full reasons for this are still under debate in the immunology field as far as my understanding goes. Why it becomes dysregulated with age and why you're more likely to develop these cytokine storms seemingly is somewhat unclear. And in the lab, we see similar things in animal models. So diabetic mice have a higher disease severity to coronavirus infection. Similarly, aged mice have a higher severity. So age plays a role, and the combined factor with the comorbidities seems to really drive severity of disease. Now, what's been pretty clear since the very onset of the SARS-2 outbreak and COVID-19 cases is that younger people are generally getting less severe disease. There are these cases of young people and children developing this multi-system inflammatory disease, which is very severe, but those cases are rare. So it really looks like the elderly people and those with comorbidities are the ones that are getting the most severe disease. And this is obviously important with regards to thinking about whether or not children should be going back to school. So just before I dive into this a bit further, I want to stress I'm not a parent and I'm not having to make any of these decisions for myself. I can totally see why people want to get kids back into schools, be that for the learning, be that for the social and the psychological impact of them being out of school, be that for the nutritional reasons of kids who aren't getting the free school meals and things like this, be it for the parents who can't so easily work from home when they're having to look after kids or can't go back to work because they're having to look after their children. But I can also see why people don't want to send their kids back to school because of the potential for mass spread of COVID-19 within that setting. So I just want to really stress that I'm not making any judgment calls here, and I'm not involved in any kind of policy decisions or anything like that. So I'm just wanting to talk a little bit about the science that's been done to look at spread within different age groups of SARS-2 and the spread of COVID-19. But to give an opinion, I guess, it does come down to how much spread of SARS-2 there is within a community. I think that's going to be the most important factor about whether or not schools should be reopening. Take, for example, the way that the opening of Major League Baseball has gone in the States so far. They've played a couple of games so far, and take the Miami Marlins, who've had an outbreak within their team, and 18 people have been confirmed positive for COVID-19. So even with all of the precautions they've been taking and all of the testing, they've still had an outbreak within the team. And it seems to me that this is most likely down to the fact that they are in a community where there is a huge amount of spread of SARS-2. Yesterday in Florida, there were a total of 9,230 new cases, and Florida has a population of about 21 million. So with so much community spread of this virus, of course, people in a baseball team, no matter how many precautions they take, they are going to be at a high risk. The same goes for trying to open schools in an area with a huge amount of community spread. Again, just because I've been thinking about the sports side of things a little bit as well. If you take the English Premier League, which had a successful restart program and finished their season last weekend, they had next to no cases. I think I remember hearing reports of one player in one team getting a positive case. And if you look at the numbers, there's significantly fewer cases of SARS-2 in the UK right now. Yesterday, there were 685 cases in a population in the UK of 66 million. So just compare those two examples of Florida, 9,000 plus cases in 21 million population, compared to 684 in a 66 million population. Just to further emphasize this point, I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. Maryland has a population of 6 million and had about 648 new cases yesterday. So a similar number of new cases with a population that's 11 times smaller than the UK. So the Premier League was able to restart, was able to finish its season, had very few cases. Baseball has tried to restart and has already had a team-wide outbreak because of community spread. And this is why I'm saying that I think the way that schools would be able to reopen safely is if there is minimal community spread of SARS-2. But like I say, that's just an opinion based on looking at the numbers and trying to set aside the other concerns that are associated with this, which are harder for me to assess being that I'm not a parent, as I was saying. But now let me just bring in a bit of the science as well. So there's a paper I was reading that I'll link down to in the description for this video, which was published in Nature Medicine back in June, which was largely built around modeling from data in 32 sites in 6 different countries. So these 6 countries were China, Japan, Italy, Singapore, Canada, and South Korea. So they had a lot of data to build their models on. And the conclusions they came to is that individuals under the age of 20 are about half as susceptible to infection by SARS-2 as those over 20, suggesting that school-age children are potentially less susceptible to infection with this virus. Importantly, though, those younger individuals are more likely to be asymptomatic. Individuals in their modeling and in their data that were aged between 10 and 19 were 21% symptomatic, so therefore 79% that were asymptomatic. Conversely, in over 70s, 69% of those individuals showed symptoms. So there's a huge swing in age, and it sort of just goes up as you look at the data from those two levels of age. So even though the school-age children may be less susceptible to infection, they're seemingly much more likely to be asymptomatic, which again, in a population that has a much higher level of spread in the community, makes it more likely that children will become infected, and because they're asymptomatic, more likely that they're going to be spreading on infection to other people. And so this brings me to another study that I was looking at, which again I'll link to down in the description, which was a contact tracing study performed in South Korea, where they were looking at household contacts and non-household contacts. So in this study, they tried to define index cases for who was the first person within a household to be infected, and then how many people did they spread it to, and things like that. But they admit that this was imperfect, and it was hard to determine the original index case because of asymptomatic individuals. But what they found is that from 10,500 or so household contacts, there was about about 12% positive COVID cases. So it looks like about 12% of the cases in this household contact tracing system they were looking at got a positive COVID case from a positive within the household. So that's for the general population. But interestingly, they saw that their highest level of spread was in school-age children, this 10 to 19 age range, the similar age range that was used in the other paper. So for this household contact tracing, they found that if there was what they presumed as the index case of a 10 to 19-year-old, then there were positive cases in 18.6%. And this was similar to the elderly range of the 70 to 90, which was 18%. So those are the two extremes. While their average was 12% overall, the extremes were around that 18 to 19%. And interestingly, it looked like the school-age children were spreading the most if you just look at those numbers. But as I say, there's some confounding factors there, and that it's hard to define the individual case, and they're looking at confirmed symptomatic people and seeing who they spread to, and they're not picking up necessarily all of the asymptomatic cases. But it's interesting that they see this peak of transmission from the 10 to 19-year-old group. So all in all, these two studies suggest that school-age children are capable of spreading the virus. They may be less susceptible, and they may be more likely to be asymptomatic, but that isn't to say that they aren't capable of spreading it on to their teachers and to family members in the household and to each other and so on and so forth. So it's really hard to know what the best course of action is, as I'm sort of stressing. And I think I just come back to the same point that it has to be in areas where there is lower community spread that it then starts to become safe to open schools. And as always, the more testing that's available, the more rapidly the tests can be turned around and results can be given, then that's how things can be done safely. And I guess my final point on all of this is I'm glad I'm a wet bench scientist who does cell biology and virology, because understanding and developing these models and implementing the public policy is fraught with difficulties. And I don't envy the people that are having to make these kinds of decisions. So I'm glad I chose my career path, I guess. And with all that said, thank you for watching. If you found the video useful or interesting, please drop a like for the YouTube metrics and leave comments and questions down below. I'll do my best to tackle them either in the comments section or as a question on my next video post if I think it merits a broader response. Please remember to subscribe and hit the bell to get the notifications if you're valuing these videos and when I post them. Alternatively, follow me on Twitter, because I always post when I've got new videos over there. I put a link to my Twitter down in the description for these videos. And please share these videos around with people who may take value from them as well. Hopefully putting out good information, and the more people that get it, hopefully the better. As always, please stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, and keep calm and carry on. We will get through this pandemic.